Good morning, Ohio. It is James Ernest of the Gruen Truth Radio Network here with Adrian Hayes. Adrian, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, James, and good morning to all your listeners, or good afternoon to your listeners in Ohio.
So, Adrian, you're an adventurer, an author. You do so many different things. How would you define yourself?
Let me put it this way. Most extreme adventurers, which I suppose is what I'm most known for presently, tend to do it all the time, but it's only one part of my work. So I'm an extreme adventurer, I'm an author, I've had a couple of books, I'm a keynote speaker, I'm a leadership and team coach and consultant, I'm a bit of a sociologist, I'm a campaigner, and I do a few documentary presentations as well. So a few strings to my bow, let's put it like that.
So it sounds like you don't ever get bored. It sounds like you're always doing something.
Well, yeah, and that's on the adventure side, most people who do that side as a living tend to do it all the time. A lot would be motivational speakers. I don't use the term motivation because motivation is only one possible objective of a speech you're doing to an audience or a company. But most people, others will do it. They'll guide people up mountains. They'll do these things. Whereas I really have only done one big project a year for the last sort of 10, 12, 15 years, one major project, and then I get all my other work done the rest of the year, basically.
So what is your favorite thing to do in the adventure world?
Very good question. I mean, because it is all changing these days, because so many more people are doing it. I think my favorite was the polar world because on that, unlike big mountains, and look, I've climbed some of the biggest mountains in the world. You are getting away from it all. You're in the high Himalayas. You're about 25,000 feet, 8,000 meters. No man can survive or no woman can survive those heights. But I think there are plenty of other climbers around these days there. So base camp is like a little tiny village or something like this. But on polar worlds, you really are on your own. Either walking to the North Pole, which I did 10, 12 years ago, walking to the South Pole the same year. It's you, your teammates, it's snow, and it's sky. And that's basically it. There is nothing else to look at, nothing else to see, and you're doing that for about a 2-month trek over ice. And it's a different world. It's absolutely amazing. Particularly the South Pole. I think Antarctica is the most amazing place on our planet, mainly because there's no humans there. There's very few apart from the scientists and people like that.
Who or what originally got you interested in doing the adventures? Is it based on your military background or is it something else?
No, the military came after that. It was as a boy growing up, and I grew up like a lot of people of our generation before social media came in, climbing trees and rivers, rafting down rivers and exploring the forests and where we lived. I grew up in a national park, a forest in southern UK. And on my, I was fascinated by polar explorers and mountaineers. I had a picture of a polar explorer on my wall at age 12, and I wrote these things down. Age 12, all these big adventures I want to do in my life. I left school at 16 and literally got straight into venturing around the world. I worked in New Zealand, I worked in Norway, climbing mountains, skydiving, sub-aqua, ocean sailing, skydiving, kayaking. Did a lot for 6 years, and it was only after about 6 years of doing this, I thought, look, I might as well get paid to do this. Let's join the British Army. So the Army came second, the adventures came first.
So what motivates you to do these amazing things?
I am going to be very unconventional and give a real inconvenient truth to your listeners here. So if you ask any climber around the world why they climb, they'll say it's the freedom, it's pitting yourself against nature, it's getting into nature, it's that view from the top, it's that challenging goal, and all these things. Now, I agree with that absolutely, and in fact, any adventure. But you can get all that by going to the Rockies. You can get that into any sort of crag or any sort of hill outside your local city. It doesn't explain why we do the major things, the big things, and the reason is And I'm going to give a little analogy here. I didn't walk to the South Pole to raise awareness of climate change. Okay, I didn't climb Everest to show others, women, diabetics, cancer sufferers, people with one leg, people with ingrown toenails, to show that they too can achieve their dream. And I didn't climb K2 to raise awareness for cancer, raise money for the poor of Pakistan. We do it for ourselves. All right? Now, that is why we do these big things. It's K2, the Olympic gold medal of Mountaineering. It's for internal significance. That's why we do these things. Where I'm uncomfortable about this, so internal significance, pursuit of achievement, pursuit of excellence, personal goals, self-worth, self-respect, living the fullest life you can be. That's the sort of internal stuff. What has changed, is my big thing these days, is how social media has now made it more external significance. Look what I'm doing, look where I am, look at me, basically. And this sits very uncomfortably for all of those who do big adventures.
Exactly. I mean, it feels like the younger generation are more focused on others and what they think of them, as opposed to doing it for themselves and doing it for the intrinsic value.
You've got it spot on. Spot on. Before 2007, really, I came back from Everest. I climbed Everest in K2. I felt on top of the world. I mean, I didn't have any social media blog. It was a personal goal, lifelong goal. But everyone after that, from 2007 onwards, when I had this social media, I started getting confused even. Thinking, what? Am I still doing these things for my personal thing, or is it to show the world out there? It's a subconscious thing where, the younger generation, but I think all of us, it's not just the millennials or snowflakes, it's everyone. We're in this unconscious PR campaign to show the world that we're worthy, that we can do this, that we've done this, whatever. And I don't think people realise it, but you've got it spot on, and it's changed everything in the face of big adventures. And that explains, there's many reasons would explain why the famous picture of Everest, or infamous picture of Everest this year in May, about 250 people queuing from the final few hundred meters to the top. It was a ghastly picture. And that explains it's become about getting that Instagram picture from the top of Everest. And Everest is the tip of the iceberg. It's everywhere. It's getting that, wherever it's Machu Picchu, it's Kilimanjaro, it's doing an Ironman triathlon, it's running a marathon, it's your holidays, it's that business class ticket on a flight. We're all putting these pictures to basically show that to get recognition and respect.
Do you ever have any fear or doubt when doing these activities?
Well, again, before going up, I think the biggest fear is before you go, actually. And I'm going to relate to K2 again, the world's second highest mountain, which has got a ghastly death to summit ratio. For every 4 to 5 people who get to the top, 1 dies trying. That's a risky escapade. But it's the months leading up to these things. You think, why am I doing this? It's too risky. It's too dangerous. I'm a father. What would I? Putting my kids at this terrible possibility that they'll be left without a father. All these things. But it's a human trait. It's the unknown. We don't do well with the unknown. Once I get there and see the mountain, that fear dissipates. And yes, there are some dodgy times when you're actually climbing it, but it's in the known. It's right there. It's in front of us. I can see it. I can feel it. My observation muscles, my awareness muscles, my gut instinct is on steroids. It's that in heightened because you're away from all the social media and technological overdose. So I think the biggest fear is actually before I go, not actually on the mountains or these adventures themselves.
So what keeps you from quitting?
Well, I think that, it's been 4 years since I did a big project now. And in the time over that, it's been a very big reflective time, also writing the book on K2, which I was asked to write 2 years after I summited. And I sort of, and I got these thoughts down and sort of asking myself now, well, if I go back to the Himalayas, which is I'm very familiar. I was a Gurkha officer in the British Army, that's the mountain troops in Nepal. They're sort of mountain people. I speak Nepalese fluently, so I know Nepal like the back of my hand. So I would go back, but what keeps me from quitting? I would go back because I want to escape from the information overload and technology gone mad in our real world, and get back into nature for two months just to escape and achieve a goal. Of course, there's about achieving a goal, so that's why I keep doing it. But it's not become now about becoming the first, the longest, the hardest, the quickest, the first on one leg, the first on blind. But you're getting all this stuff going in, the gimmicks, people trying to get the publicity to do these things. And really, the only one of recent years who's done something so exceptional is Alex Honnold of free solo fame. Many people have done exceptional things, but free climbing Al Capitan was phenomenal. But that's the sort of standards you've got to go to now to do something that hasn't been done before, and that's not in my objectives. It's not my mindset.
So the adventure usually takes about 2 months. About what type of food do you usually pack for something like that?
Well, the food, they all take, all the big 8,000 meter peaks, the big 14 highest mountains in the world, all about 25,500 feet, they all take about 2 months, because you've got, apart from the technicals, the climb, you've got to acclimatise. You cannot go to the top of these mountains in a helicopter. You can't do it in a week. You've got to acclimatise. And that takes 2 months. So the food, and the polar things all take around 2 months as well. So the food we eat depends on the expedition itself. On polar journeys, very much a bulk up before I go. I put on literally about 16, 18, 20 pounds in weight before I go on these things, because you're going to lose it. Despite eating 7,500 calories, you're going to lose it. And I'm eating primarily fat, butters, and fat to get those calories in on polar journeys. On mountains, no point bulking up, because you've got to haul that mass up that big mountain. So there's no point being 16 pounds, 18 pounds overweight, because you're going to suffer. So much more circumspect on the calories. So look, on Mountains Base Camp, you'll get spaghetti bolognese and pizzas, and the cooks we take, do fantastic. But up the mountains, I take a combination of food, of fat, protein, and carbs, not just the sugars, which so many people out there doing adventure races and Ironmans and marathons, they focus on the sugars, and it's all right for a time, but you'll just get that blood sugar rush, and you'll capitulate. You can't go on that for a long time.
So the way I understand it, Everest is higher, but K2 is more of a challenge. Is that an accurate statement?
Some people say K2 and Everest are two completely different sports. It's the first and second highest mountain in the world. Everest has been climbed now by about 7,500 people since 1953. K2 about 400 people.
Oh, wow.
That shows the difference. It's way steeper, technical ice climb, technical rock climb. The weather's always appalling. The snow conditions are always appalling. You've got rockfall dangers, avalanche dangers, and it is remote. It's the back end of beyond on the Pakistan-Chinese border. So it's altogether, it's the gold medal of mountaineering. It's widely regarded as the hardest challenge in high-altitude mountaineering on Earth. And whilst weather forecasting is getting better, clothing's obviously much better than the old days, it's still a huge challenge, and people die.
So tell us about your new book, The One Man Climbing a Journey of Trauma, Tragedy, and Triumph on K2. Why did you take the 2 years before you wrote it?
So I had 2 attempts on K2 in 2013, 2014. And the first year was marred by a tragedy. 2 of our fellow teammates got killed. I went back the second year and thankfully summited. And it was 2 years after I summited K2 the second year that the daughter of one of the guys who got killed, in fact it was a father and son, it was the sister of the brother and the daughter of the father, who was a publisher in the States, and asked me, I went to her with an idea of a book on, my personal development, self-help side of my work, and she said the book I really want you to write is on K2. She says it's an amazing story, and I think you should tell the story. So So, I started writing it, so we're talking 2016, really 2017 before I got into the flow. But really, I didn't want to write a book just about the mountain. It was, to me, I wasn't the first Brit. I was the seventh Brit to get up there, I believe, or seventh or eighth. About 300 people before me, and I thought it has been done. But it was when I decided to bring in the other two elements of the book, which was to really bring in other things from my other work, from the visiting significance, why we do these things, from the getting away from technology, from gut instincts, from awareness muscles, from risk and reward, all these things from Mother Hats into it, and then also the personal story, the very personal story that accompanied the journey. That's when it made it a far more all-round book. And I say the book is as much a lesson in human development, real relationships and teamwork, society and our lives and the world below, as it is the story of climbing a mountain. And as such, it should. And it has appealed to men, women, children of all ages, not just mountain and adventure lovers.
So is it fair to say it's much of an internal struggle as it is an external struggle, climbing the mountains and doing these amazing things?
I think, internal and external is a good way of looking at that. Perhaps I put mind versus physical. Do you mind if I go to that one first, then you can call me back to say it's internal or external? Look, you've got to be physically fit to do this thing. It's not. Some people say, look, it's 99% mental and 1% physical. It's not that. You've got to have that damn physical ability, that training, that preparation over a year, 2 years, whatever it is. But where the drive to get that physical side comes is from the mental. And I would go very clear, you've got to want that goal. And if you knew how much work I put into goal setting every year, and I don't use the 5-year plan. Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? Because that's I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years' time. The world can change anything. You don't know what's going to happen. But I do work 18 months to a year ahead, and that procedure, you really got to be clear on that goal. And the last few years, I've had a major goal of doing this expedition or that thing. And I always ask myself, why am I doing this? What exactly am I trying to achieve here? And then for the sake of what? For the sake of what? And I gave an example earlier. I don't do these for charity. All those causes, I don't do to show other they can do. I don't do it to raise money for this. I do that on the other side. But you've got to be absolutely clear and no bluffing and no BS about why you want to do that goal. And that will then give you the perseverance, the determined, the focus, the discipline, all that things that come from that. It starts on the mental and the physical follows.
Exactly. And then, like you mentioned, you have the year or year and a half goal that you have set out. But obviously, I'm sure to get to those goals, you have smaller incremental goals, either quarterly or monthly, something like that, where you have, the milestones, right?
Absolutely. One of the key things on goal setting is those interim goals. When we crossed the length of Greenland, the world's largest island, just off Canada's eastern coast, it was such a long expedition. It took us 67 days. We couldn't think of the finish line. We worked on the degrees of latitude. Every 5 or 6 days we had a degree of latitude. We crossed. We gave ourselves a little reward. It's the same with any goals in life. You can't, this 5-year thing, I don't think it always works. And you've got to break it down. You said it, break it down to quarters. I do exactly that. Companies do it. And I work on the cycles of nature, the Earth's orbit around the sun. We've got the winter solstice, the summer solstice, the equinox in spring and autumn. And they're measurable amounts that you can relate to. 3 month periods. You can set up an interim goal there and see how you're doing. A month is probably too short and a year is too long. But I go through a rigorous process every December. And it's not New Year's resolutions, James, because those 99% of those things fail, within 1 month. I go through a process between about the 15th of December to the end of December. And it's pretty, not just involving me, but with others. It's a very rigorous process of setting my goals for next year. So I know right now, I know what's going to be in my goals for 2020. But I'll still go through the process and I'll still ask myself those questions. What's this about? What am I trying to achieve it? And brainstorm with other people. It's I quite enjoy it, actually. It's quite a nice little period end for the year. Everything quietens down from about mid-December anyway. You've got time, which we don't sort of have anywhere in this crazy world we live in, and that you can reflect and you can plan ahead. It's a great time to do these things.
With all the highs and lows that go into this, how important is a good sense of humor?
Again, great question, actually, because I've been in the most dire of circumstances, the most uncomfortable, painful things, like, walking to the poles, particularly the North Pole, which was it's the hardest challenge on Earth, and that's why it's never done these days. That's walking from the coast of Canada or Russia. And, when you're struggling at temperatures down to -60, we have -60 degrees Celsius. Sorry, I need to get a Fahrenheit equivalent of that, but perhaps you can help me out. It's cold, very cold. All right, trying to go to the toilet at these temperatures, I mean, it is absolutely ghastly. It's horrendous, but you've got to somehow have a sense of humour that nothing can ever get so bad as this. So you're right, you've got to have these things. I think the British Army sort of quite renowned for a black sense of humour, dark humour they call it, black sense of humour, in the direst of circumstances, to have that one liner just to relieve the tension. It works great.
So, you a Python fan?
Am I Python? Monty
Python, yes, sir.
Oh my God, that's way before my time. But look, it's a very British sense of humour. But I like it, of course, like a lot of sitcoms from those days. I do find myself not laughing at the more modern ones. I don't find that funny at all. But anyway, maybe that's a different sense of humour.
It's all good. Is it harder getting to the top of the mountain or getting back down?
When you reach the end of a trek, polar journey, an island crossing, a desert crossing, a jungle crossing, a round-the-world ocean race, a cross-channel swim, whatever it is, most adventures around the world, you get to the finish line, your arms go aloft, the tears stream down your face, you've done it, and there's that sense of achievement. There's actually also, paradoxically, a sense of sadness that it's all over. I particularly found that at the polar expeditions. When you get to the top of the mountain, conversely, you're only halfway there. And there's a quick celebration, there's a quick picture, a quick video, a quick call on a satellite phone to home or something. Reception's pretty good because you're quite near the satellites. But you've got to get back down again. And that, on the big mountains, is where probably 80% of all the deaths occur on that descent. You're tired, you're depleted of oxygen, you're hanging your life on a thin rope to get down, you're abseiling down, the weather might close in, one mistake and you could fall to your death, by 10,000 feet or something. So it is hard, and not just on big mountains, but you ask anybody who's hiked in the hills, and it's hard going up, but coming down, so people haven't done it. And we've had Olympic athletes join us on some treks in some high mountains in the Middle East. Coming down, you just don't use these muscles, whether it's cycling, running at the gym, you don't use these muscles. And we've had top-class sportsmen walking like Bambi after they've been on a hike with us, just at a small level. So getting down is tough, yes.
So what advice would you give to our listeners that are interested in starting, obviously not to the level that you're at, but, starting more on the very basic level, something to get more outdoorsy, to get more exploring the world on a beginner's level?
Yeah, and I say to others, look, you don't need to go and climb Everest or K2 or walk to a North Pole or something to enjoy the great outdoors. We've got it everywhere. In the States, you've got a fantastic outdoors there. And I think of all the adventures where you get of all the outdoor sports, you get a real sense of adventure, sometimes just a few miles from your home, is either on the water, if you're lucky enough to live by a big lake or by a sea, or on a rock climbing crag. And I'd say hiking as well, you get it to a degree as well in those hills. But rock climbing on a climbing crag just maybe a few miles from a city centre, you're in your own adventure world and nothing else matters apart from that next hold getting up a crag. So they're two things I think you could really enjoy. And then I put hiking as well, because there's nothing beats going on a hike for a day, leaving the phones behind. Just leave them, or maybe take them with you in your backpack to take a few pictures. But just get away from this thing. That's the real joy of getting to the great outdoors. It's leaving the technology behind, not being desperate to take that Instagram picture and posting it at the first opportunity you can get.
So what's the next adventure for you?
Well, again, going back to what I said earlier, I look, this is in my sort of coaching, consulting, sociology sort of world. Life is like a river, and there's certain times that's great for periods of time. I've had a good 15 years of extreme expeditions, and I'm going to go back to them. But I've had a little break. Right now, the priority is on this book, because having been asked to write it, and having brought in all these messages, and particularly I did message one about looking at the world below from the top of the world when you put yourself in the face of death. Your priorities really do change. So I want people to read it. So we're launching it officially in North America on the 30th of September, and I want people to read the book. So that's the priority for this year. Next year, hopefully back to the Himalayas, and we'll see. We'll maybe go for the third highest mountain in the world, or maybe the fifth. But again, I'll say what am I really ask myself? What am I trying to achieve here? What's the purpose of this, and the real why? Don't try and BS to anybody. Really be honest about this. So yeah, I've got a few more things up my sleeve, but it won't be gimmick. I won't be the first person to cross the United States of America on one leg, or crossing it blindfolded, or on a motorcycle, or any of these things. We're sadly getting more and more, or the youngest, or the oldest, too many gimmicks and too many firsts trying to be done for the sake of that recognition. It won't be for that. It'll be for something integral to my own values and who I am. And I think every one of your listeners should ask themselves the same question too.
Excellent. So it sounds like at the end of the month, our listeners should definitely check out your new book. And then before we let you go, where on social media, where on the web should they check you out at?
Yeah, so thanks very much. I mean, look, having decried social media, I use it all as much as everyone, but I'm just not addicted to it. We have to do it. It's the way to get your message out there. So my website is adrianhayes.com. That's ADRIANHAYES.com. My Twitter is Adrian Hayes. My Instagram and Facebook page are Adrian M. Hayes. So we're all two of them got Adrian Hayes, two Adrian M. Hayes. So welcome anybody of your listeners coming in and sharing the journey, but also not just my adventures, but just the lessons from the top.
Sounds great, Adrian. We greatly appreciated having you on the show today and getting to speak with you.
Many thanks to you, James. Thanks for that.